Well, let's talk about Cope real quick. Let's talk about something. So this was really interesting, and I do want to give them some credit here, okay? So in my TikTok or review, one of, I don't know, most of the TikToks were clipped from the reviews, so I just want to be clear. I'm not sure where this initially started from, but I said at some point that in Starfield, the exploration of a planet is an illusion, because effectively what you have are a bunch of little fish bowls that are generated off of a parent seed determined by the planet, but it's not contiguous for the player. I have been corrected. What? Yes, I have been corrected, but it's not as satisfying as you might think. If you're hoping for me to just be totally wrong about this. I love being corrected, and I want to shout this out because, of course, I want to believe and hold as many true positions as possible and as few false ones. So if I'm wrong about something, I want people to tell me. I want to be corrected. And this was one such case. So Synth Potato, which is a tremendous name, started posting this little tweet thread. And what he said was, it appears that tiles in Starfield are actually fully connected, even across biomes. Happy to see that Bethesda cared about this tiny detail. I know stuff like this isn't important, but this is a game that'll be played for years and modded to death. Details matter over time. WBGS. Thank you, Wet Donkey.
Honestly, feel like Starfield is more like Mass Effect than No Man's Sky.
I totally agree. Again, thank you for the $4.99. I totally agree. And I think that that once again lands at Todd's feet, because Todd pitched this as a like grand Bethesda RPG with all of these No Man's Sky-like features of like galaxy exploration, 1,000+ planets that you can freely land on and explore, unlimited gameplay opportunities. And that's just not true. It's just not true. And I'll show you why it's really not true here in just a minute. Because we're going to actually boot up the game and I'm going to show you something that I discovered. I thought I was being trolled when I was told this, but it turns out it's real. It's something I wish I had realized during my review and I would have called it out. I didn't even think it was true, so I didn't bother, but it is. Again, we'll get to that. But with this, they show this little tidbit where they are on a planet's surface and they go forward. They're at the invisible wall, but you can see New Atlantis in the far off distance, but you can't reach it. The invisible wall is all the way back here. Now, a couple of things to note, and this is what I noticed kind of immediately. They are clearly using console commands to give themselves flight. That's something you can do in console commands on PC and all BGS games. You can just basically freely move around. It's something devs use all the time. And so that to me says, okay, well, maybe they used console commands just to get a better view of it, to showcase this a little better, or perhaps they only access this with console commands. So we'll, put a pin in that. Think about it. Mr. Sir Johnny, didn't the guy on YouTube, Luke Stevens, say that planets are illusions and that it's just randomly generated zone whenever you land? It's not what people saying randomly. That's not what I said. I said it's built off of a seed. Seeds are not random, they're procedural. It may sound like just semantics because it is, but again, if we're going to say details matter, that also matters. It's not random, it's built off of parent seeds. Yeah, he was wrong. All these tiles are connected. It's just that landing tiles next to each other are really hard due to the fact that they're separated by actual pixels on the map. Weird. What does that mean? So I said, this is great. Can you show me how this works? Can you also clarify if this is something that can only be done on PC, or can it be done with console too? And then they go in to show some of this stuff in more extended detail. But basically what you have to do, if you show this, so these are the individual like pixels, which represent landing zones. So each of these pixels is its own landing zone. And when you land on one, there's that big icon that pops up on top of it, and it covers up the pixels next to it. So you can't actually by default select the pixel right next to the landing zone you're on. How these guys have done it is by using the console command to remove the HUD elements and the overlays so that they can then go in and select the exact pixel next to it. And so then they can show it as being, actually contiguous, which I think is super cool. I think that's super cool. However, to say that this effectively debunks the idea that the tiles are not contiguous or the landing zones are not contiguous, I think is also a little disingenuous, because if you need console commands to achieve this, literally 99.9% of players who don't use console commands are never going to see that these tiles are contiguous, because the only way you can do it is by turning off the HUD and then going in very carefully and trying to select the exact pixel next to the one you're currently landed on. That to me, like, it's cool, but it's almost like saying in Elden Ring you can fight the Elden Beast immediately. And I'm like, okay, how? And they're like, well, if you use console developer commands and skip all the other boss fights and jump right to his location, you can fight him immediately. And I'm like, I guess that you're right, but like, you're also wrong. Like, you're technically right on a technicality, but for effectively every player within like 99.9%, they're never going to see this or realize it. And the same thing where people are like, oh no, the other thing that dropped, which was that Alana Pierce went and she actually on stream flew for 7 hours towards Pluto and eventually reached it. But when she reached it, it was just like an empty texture. And it was invisible, you see? So she goes inside it, it disappears. You can't actually go in. So it's cool that you can go to Pluto and you can fly contiguously. But again, like, this also to me is not surprising at all, because MS Paint time. When you pull up the game and you set like objective markers and stuff, it'll tell you how far away things are. It'll say, oh, this is 10 astronomical units away or whatever it is. And that's because if the player is here and those objects are off here in space, they are actually measuring a distance between wherever you are and that object. And so in the engine, they've put that object way off in the distance to measure the distance between you and it. So it makes sense if you can travel at 100 meters per second or whatever it is, that you eventually would reach it. But because this was never intended to be reached, it's just going to be basically a placeholder object that can be used to measure the distance to show you how far away from it you are. So, like, again, it's a cool thing on a technicality that, yeah, technically you can fly to Pluto. But again, for 99.9% of players, they will never, ever see it. And yeah, it's a dwarf planet. It's not actually a planet. Let's be factual here. Pluto is a planet. So with all of this being said, I think it's just it's tricky, because while something can be true on a technical level, yes, technically if you use console commands, turn off HUD elements and then select pixel perfect the next landing zone, it's contiguous. That's cool. You can't run from tile to tile. You can't do that, of course. They limit you. So it, in terms of gameplay, doesn't really matter. But it's still cool that it is, in fact, contiguous as far as we can tell. But every single player that is not willing to use console commands, which, again, forfeit all achievements on your save, unless you're using separate mods, which is funny. Like, if you're not willing to do that and then also spend time trying to pixel perfect select it on your monitor, they're never going to see this. So you're technically right. Yes, it is contiguous, and I will happily correct the record and say I was wrong when I said that they are not contiguous. For 99.9% of players, they're not contiguous, because there's no way they would ever be able to play it in a way where they are contiguous. But on a technical level, they are. So what we do with this information, I have no idea. But here we are. This is where we're at now. I don't know what to do. So, yeah. Do items persist on different adjacent tiles? Not like points of interest, no. So like if there's a big point of interest that's generated on one tile and then the next one you jump to, it's not like that point of interest is going to be visible in the distance. So if that's what you mean, no. I've been pretty impressed by the exploration. I don't know how anyone could expect 1,000 full-size planets with tons of interesting stuff to do and see on every single one. I don't think they ever said that. No, what Todd's really good at is not saying things. Todd is very good at saying things that get your imagination going. And then he just leaves it and lets you fester and boil. And that's why he's a great salesman. But it's also why a lot of people end up feeling disappointed by his games. But he doesn't really care as long as they've sold, you know? Yeah, the DLC, I've seen that too, Christian. People are saying that Bethesda always intended for vehicles to come to the game, but they're just going to come as a DLC. If that happens, that will be one of the most insane choices in gaming history. To produce an open world, or I guess open galaxy game that is very broken in terms of exploration, where you're expected to just run kilometers at a time with nothing to do between that to get to points of interest. And then they're going to sell you the solution to that. Like that's insane. That is crazy. Yeah, I think Issa, I think you're right. That's why vehicles are not in the game by default. It would greatly improve the exploration in terms of the minutia of moving from point of interest to point of interest, but it would make it way more likely that most people would hit those invisible walls constantly. So I think that that's mostly what it is. I think you're right. I think the most impressive thing about the game is the interconnectedness of it. Every companion has dialogue, likes, dislikes, and just random side quests that ultimately are inconsequential. I think that they are really well done, the companions mostly. I mean, I would say that a lot of the time they started rambling about random stuff. There was also a couple things I didn't mention in the review, like what's his name? Colt, whatever, Cowboy Boy. He would have things where, like, at one point I killed somebody that he did not want me to kill, and I really pissed him off, and it said, you know, he hated that. Oh, that was terrible. What a terrible decision. And the whole time I'm walking around my ship, and he keeps saying, as I'm just walking around doing inventory management, which is also like terrible in Starfield, he's like, we shouldn't talk for a while. I'm pretty upset. And he'd had dialogue like that where I'm like, oh, he's pissed. And then I tried to talk to him, and he was just like, hey, what's up? That thing we just did in combat, that was super cool. And he just like totally did not acknowledge it. It was really weird. So I don't know if that was like, if that was a bug, I don't know. But he was like super pissed. And then I tried to talk to him, and he's just, hey man, what's up? It's like, okay. The caves are copy and pasted. If they aren't, it's really, really hard to tell because they all kind of look the same. But that's also just because caves kind of look identical. There's only so many ways you can make caves really unique. Encumbrance is terrible. Yeah, I think the inventory management stuff, Bethesda just has got to figure that out. Every game they release has terrible inventory management stuff, and it drives me crazy. On PC, a lot of the time after I've played the game a couple times and I'm like, oh, let's go back for another run, I'll just give myself unlimited carry weight because I just am sick and tired of it. It's just insane. Like, I have to stop exploring and then run back to base, dump everything in a chest, and then move on. Like, it's just crazy. It's like, that's not fun. I know maybe some people like it. I just don't. I can't stand you can't sprint now. You're over encumbered. Like that thing, Louis, I will openly hate. I openly hate over encumbrance stuff in games. Like, just ask yourself, why is there encumbrance in the first place? Encumbrance is make it so you have to go back to your base and dump it off. That's the whole purpose, is they want you to have a base where you can build stuff, have storage, and that's where you go and dump stuff. Except in Starfield, you have that in your ship, and you have that in your bases, and then your companions also have carry weights and can carry stuff for you. I think there should just be automated systems where you get back to your ship after exploring, and it automatically pulls resources out of your inventory. It pulls all the random stuff, can maybe sort it into what is going to be useful for crafting, and then maybe just set up a thing where when you land at certain spaceports, they can ship it off to your base. Like, just something a little bit more automated so I don't have to spend 45 minutes dealing with my inventory, you know? Like, that's not fun to me. But then again, I will be honest, I do like sim games, and a lot of people say sim games are not fun at all, so it could very well just be me. Let's be honest. Yeah, you got to load up your ship. Even your ship will reach carry capacities. So then you have to go and fly your ship back to one of your bases and dump that off. I just wish there was a way to like automate the process a little bit more so it's not just so tedious and focused on busy work, you know? Justin, thank you for the 5. Is Starfield the best evidence the creation engine should be ditched? I mean, ditching the engine at this point, I'm not sure is the answer, but it clearly needs a lot more work. I mean, in the modern age, I think the expectation has just risen that if you're going to do open world stuff, you load in and that's it. Like extra load screens after that are just, it's not competitive in the AAA space anymore. And you can say like, I don't mind load screens. That's cool. But a lot of people like didn't mind 8-bit graphics, but it doesn't change the fact that AAA games moved into 3D graphics, and that's where we are now. Like stuff changes and evolves, and right now it seems like the industry has just moved past these constant load screens between individual rooms of buildings, and then going from this half of the city to this other portion of the city, and we've just moved past that. And so to get a game like Starfield that has it just makes it feel really outdated, because frankly it is compared to what we've gotten from other studios, you know. But I think it needs a lot of revamping. Ditching the engine is not that easy, and especially just look at how most Unreal Engine games over the last year have launched. Most of them launched with terrible stuttering. They launch with really rough performance. I mean, Jedi Survivor is probably the best example, where it just launched with all sorts of problems and then also was a little bit buggy. I ran into a couple of soft locks, and then it barely runs unless you're running it with AMD FSR2 on console. So Unreal Engine maybe is not the ultimate solution. Crispy, also, thank you for 4 months, my friend. That's crazy. I saw a PC article saying that BGS said most planets are boring because the moon was boring, and that's what our universe is likely like. I mean, the exact quote, I know the interview they're talking about with Todd. What Todd said was like, he appreciated the beauty of... What was the exact phrase? It was like, he quoted somebody. I don't remember. If anybody can remember the quote, he quoted somebody, but it was effectively like, there's beauty in emptiness. There's beauty in something being barren. The great expanse. And I think that's true. But like, while that's true, I don't think it necessarily makes for a fun video game. You know, like in the same way that if Great Desolation, maybe that was it. In the same way that like, if a game like, let's just go Red Dead Redemption again. If that game, they have some realistic elements, such as you get cold, you have to wear the right kind of clothes for the environment you're in. You can be over encumbered, you know, depending on how much you're carrying or what that is. But the inventory is very, very open. All things considered, it's not like you can only carry 4 cans of beans. You can carry a lot of stuff on you. But they have elements of the game's design that are very grounded and very realistic, and then others that are not at all. And it's because some of those realism elements make for a more fun game, a more dynamic game, like having it so you have to wear your winter clothes, quickly swapping them on your horse when you go into the snowy region. And when you go back down into the swamps, you have to change your outfit again. That's actually satisfying because you can go and customize the outfit, buy different clothes, and then you can quickly swap between them. And it offers different effects. That's cool. But if they made it so Arthur Morgan has to hop off his horse every hour to pee or take a crap, that wouldn't be that fun after an hour or two. You know, like it would be realistic. It would be technically accurate, but it wouldn't be very much fun. In the same way that like Arthur getting off his horse once every 200 times, maybe he twists his ankle and then he can't sprint for 3 hours in game until he goes to see a doctor. Like these things would be accurate. They'd be immersive. They'd be correct in the setting, but they wouldn't make for fun games. And that's where I'm at with some of this stuff that's described by Todd, where it's like, oh, the reason some of these planets are totally empty and uninteresting is because that's what's accurate. I'm like, that's true. A lot of these planets are empty because there wouldn't be anything on them, but that doesn't make for a fun video game. You know? What's clear to me with Starfield is just, I think it would have been much better served if they had given you this solar system to explore, and that's it. If they let you explore a desolate version of Earth, go to Mars, go to Pluto, and maybe the game ends and you get to move to a new solar system or something that's randomly generated for the end game. Something like that could be cool. And I think that would have caused or would have allowed them to really fine tune the experience for players, I think. Because I just think that they bit off a lot more than they could chew. Let's see, Logan, also thank you for the 2. Starfield, most Bethesda game ever, for better or worse. Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say to people before the game came out. So I was like, listen, it's probably going to be pretty good, but it will be a Bethesda game. People saying now it's not going to have any bugs or technical issues because it's the Creation Engine 2. It's brand new. It's like, that is freaking dumb. Like, no, it's a Bethesda game. It will still play like one. But people just wanted to believe that it was going to be something totally, totally different. And so those people are disappointed. But the people that I think were able to maintain a little bit more of a level head were not disappointed. He took my thing.